Zach, where is that bottle? Does it say on there where it's bottled?
Not that I'm seeing.
Not that you're seeing. Where I live in Grand Rapids is like, I walk my dog around the Coca-Cola bottling plant. So I'm always like on the lookout for like bottled in Grand Rapids, and I'm like, I know where that is. Walk my dog past there. Okay. 30 more seconds. Officially start. I drove here and I did not put my coffee firmly into my cup holder, which is a problem because I tend to drive kind of fast. So I've got coffee all down the back of my leg. So I smell really good today. But if you're worried about what that is, it's my coffee.
Vanilla bean?
No, this would be Starbucks Italian roast. Okay, so today I was going to start diving into like CSS3 motion properties and things like that, but I think I'm going to talk about motion more generally, sort of like we talked about color more generally last week, and then we can get into some like serious, let's write some code stuff on Wednesday. I have moved your project 1 due date, if you did not see the Basecamp post, to Friday night instead of Wednesday night. I'm finishing up reading the page proofs and doing the index for my book, which are supposed to be due tomorrow, and there's no way it's going to happen. So I'm going to probably be working the rest of the week. So I figured there's no reason to ruin your life 3 days earlier if I'm not even going to be able to touch your projects until the weekend. So you've got until Friday, 11:59 p.m. to turn those in. This week I've added some motion readings to the list, along with the Lepkin thing, which it was brought, and I don't have the book with me, it was brought to my attention by at least one person in here that the pages that I referenced on production problem 4, on a certain edition, do you know what edition you have?
I can send you a picture of it.
Yeah. There is like a version that was published by the Maryland College of Art or whatever. So I have listed 36 to 37, that's the Princeton Architectural Press page numbers for the Google fonts recommended in that book. But in whatever edition Matt has, it's pages 40 to 41. It'll be the page that has, amongst other typefaces, it'll have PT Sans listed there. So if you haven't done Project 4 yet, or if you saw it and it was like, hey, you can have this font for $75, and you thought, wow, I didn't think I would have to pay money for typefaces for 362. You weren't supposed to. It's just a pagination problem. Okay? So 36, 37 if you're in the Princeton Architectural Edition, 40 to 41 in whatever mystery edition Matt has. Did you buy it off Amazon? Do you remember?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is Amazon.
Yeah, because they do have that MIC, Maryland Institute of Art. MIA. Okay. So next week, Monday, I'll introduce the second project. And we'll talk a little bit more about HCI guidelines and ARIA roles. And we'll do a little bit more with responsive media. And we'll pull in a bunch of stuff that day, the March 8th. Because I want to send you off strong to your spring break. So we're going to tie in color and motion and events and all that stuff to talk about responsive media. Okay, which we only talked about sort of briefly and in passing last semester in 361. So we'll get to that. And then it'll be spring break. And then the semester is over. Okay? I mean, it feels like it, right? It goes really fast after spring break. All right. So motion. What is the purpose, and here I'm talking generally, every kind of visual interface that you can imagine, from like the self-checkout kiosk at the grocery store to like the gas pumps at the gas station that have like animated screens on them. What is the purpose of motion in an interface?
Human eyes attracted to motion. Gets your attention.
Okay, so it attracts our attention, but then what? right? It's like an annoying little kid, like, hey, 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 right? That Stewie clip from Family Guy, mama, mom, mom, mama, mom, right? That gets Lois's attention eventually, but then what, right? So, yes, we are attracted to emotion.
It's kind of directed to something the authors of the website want you to look at.
Can you say that first part again?
It's directing towards something that the authors of the website want you to definitely see. Or
Maybe, right? Like, have we ever seen like the little restless interface, like when iOS changed and you could access the camera from the home screen? The home screen would kind of jump a little bit. But remember that little emotion? And basically it was to say, hey, like if you do this gesture and whip up the screen, you'll have your camera right there, so you don't have to unlock your phone and choose the camera app and do these other things, right? So you get that kind of restless motion. So yeah, our eyes might be directed someplace. But that can get real annoying too. It's like the sites that still have like the flashing GIF banners, like it's 1998 still, like, you know, lots of flashing motion and stuff like that. So motion can be a distraction. Yes? Oh, I don't have the mic again, huh? It's been that kind of day. Okay. What else can motion do? Anybody play video games? And I'm talking like also old school 8-bit Super Mario Brothers. Yeah. There's two purposes that motion serves in Super Mario. Do we all know? I'm going for that one because I figure it's the reference in the room. Plus it's the My Day kind of game, so I know a lot about it. What's the purpose of motion in Super Mario Brothers? Versus a game like, and this is even before my time, do you remember the original Donkey Kong game?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Where you have these platforms and ladders and there's a monkey up here and it's throwing a barrel down. Right? That stays static the whole game. Right? You get different boards, but this doesn't shift left and right. Versus Super Mario Brothers on your old school TV where there's parts of the level that you've been to and there's parts of the level that you're going to be getting to eventually, and then there's the actual part where you're playing with the pipes and the blocks that you can hit and the coins and things like that, right? What is the purpose of motion this way?
Continuance.
Continuance? What do you mean by that?
Like stages or levels, you'll never stay in, I mean, you'll be in one area, but as soon as you complete or whatever you have to do in that specific area, you move on to the next area, so the graphic display has to move on to the next area.
Right. What was the limitation of video gaming at the time of Super Mario Brothers release that we had these wacky scrolling games like this?
Memory?
Okay, memory, and what specifically about memory?
Instance?
Say it again.
Instance memory?
RAM?
Sure. Your graphical processor in an 8-bit system can't hold a lot, which means it can't do what? What do we expect now? Yeah, 3D, you can move, right? Not just on a single axis here, right? Or we're on the x-axis, but now we expect a fully fledged y, and we expect a even more fully fledged z-axis, right? But this particular use of motion is all over the place in all kinds of different operating systems, right? Does this drive anybody nuts when I go screen to screen like this? It's okay to be irritated by it. I would probably be irritated by it. Okay, good. There's a few head shaking. Yeah, it's irritating. Make sure you write that on the course evaluation. He's so irritating with the screen. What is the purpose? Why not? Why have all of this motion? Why not just show screen 1, show screen 2, show screen 3? Could you do that? Yeah, and it would be computationally a lot less expensive to do that. Why animate this?
People like to see it actually moving. The next day.
People like to see it moving. Why do they like to see it moving?
They know it actually works.
They know. Okay, so there's a sense where motion tells us that our computer is behaving properly, right? This is the interminable spinner GIF, right? Which, of course, I'm going to draw like a crazy Walmart star here, right? That perpetually spins around, right? Versus something like the progress bar that gets to, like 93%, and then it just stays there forever and you die, right? So what do some progress bars have? They've got like a little shimmer on them, right? Like we're waiting for a download or something. Like your computer hasn't frozen. There's just something else that's hanging up here, right? And of course, if you're Adobe or something, you go to 99% and then you just wait there for 25, 30, 40 minutes or something like that, right? Race to 99% and then you sit there. Somebody else is going to add a thought? Theo.
I was going to say like a secondary function could be, besides showing that it actually works, like the technicality, it also adds like more of a personality trait in the sense of like it adds excitement.
Okay.
Especially towards like video games, like the motion shows that like, oh, I got more levels to play. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it keeps the user going.
Okay, so there's an exploratory purpose to
Yeah.
motion then, right? Yeah, absolutely. You want to keep going here, and of course, certain games like, here I'm going to reference more 8-bit Nintendo things because I don't feel old enough today, right? Like Battletoads. Anybody play Battletoads? Fantastic game. Or Double Dragon, right? You sometimes would have shifts where you're no longer in control of the motion and it kind of takes you to some new section of the game, right? Which is just a little trick that usually was used to load up the next part of the level or something while you shift it over. How about this kind of view, where I can go to my multiple virtual desktops like this? Is this conflicting? Right? Here I'm on a screen. I can go to this screen, or I can double back and go to this screen, right? How are these screens aligned in space? It's not a tough question, right? If we look at this particular representation, you can see exactly how they're aligned in space, right? We've got one screen here, right? Boom. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I'm sitting on screen 3, I can move, right, between these two. But an interesting thing happens if I'm on 3 and then I use this particular interface. Where does the screen come from? The top, right? Suddenly, what is represented as a nice linear motion like this gets broken, because now these screens can just pop over. They explode out of the icon. Okay? For those of us who are in a program like information technology and management, this does not matter at all, right? We all have fairly computer-savvy brains. We can accept that we're looking at the same screen regardless if we get to it from this direction or if we slide back and forth between it. But if you are my dear old 95-year-old Aunt Martha, right, this is a problem. Because who is this interface for? Probably not even my Aunt Martha. She's cool with just one screen and like 100 windows open on it that she'll close one by one until she gets the one she wants, and then she reopens all her programs again, right? But who is motion for? Who is spatial representation like this for? No one seems particularly bothered at all about these two different spatial orientations. Is this okay? Am I just making a big deal out of something that doesn't matter? It's not the first time that's happened. All right.
I think it adds transition, which is important.
Okay.
You don't see where something came from, and suddenly pops up. It's kind of confusing. So, like, having that as a transition to go from one desktop to another gives more clarity to the user.
Okay. But the question becomes clarity relative to what? Right? Here I'm choosing screens from a menu, and the screen is popping out. Here I'm sliding back and forth between screens. Matt?
It's like when you select from the upper portion
Right, I totally accept that that's what happens in this localized sense, right? Yes, there's no confusion whatsoever about when I'm looking at this arrangement of the screens, right? This is when I'm sliding back and forth using hotkeys, that's a one-to-one representation in my brain as to where things are located. What I'm talking about is that, and this is fine even if we want to accept if this is the only way that someone switches screens, right? But if I go from desktop 4 to desktop 1 and it pops out like that, we no longer have this particular, here comes a nice English class word, metaphor. It violates the metaphor, right? When I'm sliding back and forth, right, the metaphor is very similar to our Mario Brothers game where we've got screen 1 and screen 2 and screen 3. And when the motion works like this, right, where for that half second we're seeing part of one screen and part of another screen as the thing whizzes by, this particular interface is not internally consistent because the metaphor here is you've got 4 screens. They are just items in a menu, something that you can select, and when you choose one, it pops down out of the top over your existing screen, right? Now these screens are not in one linear dimension this way. They're actually in 3 dimensions, right? Because when this thing pops up, it goes over the top of my existing screen. So now, instead of having my screens laid out like that, there's no other way I can draw this without having them shift a little bit. Let me try to get my numbers right. Now my mental model is this, right? It's almost like a deck of cards, and whichever one I choose is going to come over the top of the one in front. Which one of these things is more like what you experience as a human being away from a computer? Which is the linear one?
Yeah.
Or this one?
Side by side.
Side by side? Where do you see things that are side by side in the world? There's a great example right over there. Right? Seriously, the periodic table of elements. If you could imagine those blown up so big that you have to walk past them so you can't see one. Right? This is very much a real world metaphor. Go to the Art Institute and look at paintings. They each have their own spot on the wall. You have to physically make your way through the space in order to see all the paintings. The paintings are not all stacked up where you hit one that you want to see and then it comes over the top, right? Because this particular, right, this does not happen in the real world where things shrink and then they're suddenly blown up and the thing behind them disappears, right? It might in Harry Potter world, but not in the physical world that we inhabit, right? Because even if you have a deck of cards, what happens? You pull it out of the deck and you flip it over and then you put it back in front, right? This is a kind of motion or a kind of illusion that we're totally willing to accept, right? Nobody's losing their mind like, oh my God, you could never do that in the real world, right? But if we're thinking about designing for users who don't think about computers the way that we do, who aren't comfortable with interfaces the way that we are, this kind of inconsistency becomes a problem. It becomes an even bigger problem in terms of conceiving this stuff when we have something like this. Where did that come from? Behind us, right? If we kind of try to slow down the motion, it fades out. Let's see how slow I can drag my sweaty fingers here. Right? Those things just kind of appear. And they're arranged in such a way that, let me choose a background that's a little bit more colorful. Oh, that's funny too, right? So it's doing, right? You can't quite see it because the color reproduction is so bad up here, but it's blurring out the background of my desktop. But it's not blurring out the actual menu that's behind it. Right? My actual terminal window that's sitting here is not part of the blur when I pull this thing up like that. And now suddenly we've got this happening. right, Rosa? Our nice side sliding motion. So does that mean if I go up, I can see all of my icons? No. Where does this metaphor come from? And here we have to think Apple products. iPhone, right? This is the way that you have your iPad or your iPhone, right? Your sets of icons where you go back and forth. This little piece of visual grammar down here where we have these 3 little gray dots, right? Highlighting the one that we're actually on right now. But this has no bearing at all with the other metaphors of the desktop, which is back here. Alejandro, you're stretching or? Yes. Okay. Let's look at some iOS stuff. Hi, Hank. Right? These icons, when I click an icon, let's say I'm going to go to this store map over here. It's the one that looks like the little S. I love my weather apps. When you tap an icon in iOS, where does the app come from?
Right side.
It comes from
Let's go to another app. We'll go to the settings app.
It comes out of the app.
Yeah. So the metaphor that we're using in iOS is that when you have an app icon, right, the whole screen that you're going to be interacting with, and I know this is a bad marker, right? So we have an icon, and your program grows to fit your whole screen, right? It comes out of that icon. Okay? And if we do other things like Google Docs, hopefully nothing incriminating comes up here. Or if I go to my Garner's Modern English Usage, right? This is an interesting one because this app doesn't have a whole lot of design to it. This is basically the native UI elements. So if I'm interested in reading about ergative verbs, okay? See, I've got this list that I've whittled down. And where do the definitions actually live relative to the list? If I tap on it, that slides over. So it's as if okay, so I tap the icon, program explodes out of the icon, right? And here I've got a list of things, and when I activate one of these lists, I'm looking at something that's over on this side, right? Here's my actual definition with all of my information, which gets slid into view here. Does that make sense? All right. But then if I tap this, then I get, see, I'm tapping the little hamburger. Right now I get this little secondary menu here if I hit Browse Usage Guide. Does everybody see the inconsistency there? I know I freak out about stuff, but come on. Look, let's look at a definition for abandoned. It slides in from over here. Great. And if I hit the little back arrow next to Usage Guide, it slides back. Cool. The world works exactly the way I predict, right? You take something here, you slide it over here, you slide it back. Everything is fine. If I look at abandon again, but this time I say, hey, I'm going to go to this hamburger menu. Hey, I think I'd like to go back to browsing the usage guide. It's like, cool. And now suddenly, the usage guide has gone all the way around the planet. Right? Because now this simple, here's our list, here's our definition, right, where we toggle back and forth between those two things. That's fine. But now suddenly, the list is over here. Because it now came in this way instead of coming back this way, the way that we would expect. If you start doing this, and hopefully some of my horrible keep you awake at night habits do make it into your brain, if you start watching movement in your apps, in mobile sites and things that you use, you will see that these kinds of wild inconsistencies are everywhere. Right? Okay, so let's refresh. Okay, so if I go to my app, thing explodes out of there. Now if I go to multitasking mode, what? Where's the icon now, right? Let's refresh. My app exploded out of the icon, and if I go to multitasking mode now, my icon is over the top of the corner of the app, and now suddenly there's this string of apps here. Which, okay, that's fine, but what happens if I'm a curious person who says, well, what's to the other side? Oh, it's your home screen with the little app down here that you clicked on, right? This is inconsistent. We're not creating a believable world that you can live in here. Things are taking on different shapes. Okay? What I'm interested in the article you'll read this week, from whence the term at least came to my knowledge of it, is what's known as semantic motion. Right? You knew you weren't going to learn the last thing in here about semantics with just HTML. What is semantic HTML? What does that mean? If we're writing semantic HTML and we use this tag, what is going to show up here? Yes, there's one correct answer, a paragraph, not some crap, right? Like, I don't know, it might be a list item, might be an input, might be a whole form, might be a heading or something like. No, if we're doing semantic HTML, this has a particular meaning, which is to say that when we use the paragraph tag, it's because we're marking up a paragraph, nothing else, right? Same as if we use any of our other HTML tags. If I'm using a heading 1 tag, what goes in between it? Yeah, top level heading, right? It's weird how hard you have to think about just doing what something says. But that's the idea behind semantics, is that we're trying to convey meaning, nothing else. So if we think about motion semantically, what does that mean? Akvila.
The article mentioned that semantic motion should be like focusing on the screens, or focusing on like the icons individually and what they would do in different contexts. So like it's kind of, I almost saw it as like mobile, like focus on the smaller things first and not the big screen.
Okay. So, and yes, and good for you for reading ahead. You get the gold star for today. Yeah. When we're thinking about designing something like, before we even worry about opening an app, if we say this app is going to be represented, as a little icon, we have to think about what this icon is in space, right? I mean, what's the if you have some huge monitor, right? You've got a huge 36-inch Super HD 5K screen or something like that. You have plenty of space to work with. You can probably represent the entirety of whatever you've got. When we're talking about these tiny little phones, right? We can't do, what was the Windows solution? Right? Your Microsoft or your Adobe. You've got this nice huge window. Where do you put everything? For Microsoft Word, for Adobe Photoshop, what do you start doing? Okay, so first thing is we're gonna just go up here and we're gonna start using these cryptic, right? File, view, edit, tools, right? File, view, edit. I mean, does anybody ever think that these are 3 of the weirdest words that you would put on a menu ever? Especially when you think about what drops down, right? Even here on my little QuickTime player, there they are. File, edit, view. I mean, these have been around forever. Go look at the original Macintosh classic interface, right? Our first graphical interface computer. You'll see file, edit, view. Which, again, if we're thinking about metaphors, we have to think, again, not like our sophisticated computer-using selves in here, but we have to think about the user who's like, oh, sweet, the Apple Store has classes I can take so I can learn how to use my MacBook. right? That's not you guys, I'm guessing. No shame if you are, right? But if you think about people like your parents and your grandparents' age, they might very well take those classes. Go hang out. You can go to the Apple Store down on like North Avenue. They have classes in the evenings, and they're just held out right in their open space there. Go sit there sometime and just play with one of the gadgets and listen to what people ask about computers. I wonder if I can get sound in here, although it doesn't really matter because it's... Everybody ever seen this? Let's see if I can get my sound output. Crestron! I don't have anything called Crestron. Let's see if I can get this to... Do you know how I can change the volume? I mean, it doesn't really matter because it's subtitled. So the idea is it's a medieval help desk. And here's this monk. Oh.
Ja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner, inni her så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst. Så for å komme videre så tar du tak i et ark på den måten her, og så liksom blar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten der.
Jeg blar, altså.
Du blar, ja.
Men når jeg skal tilbake, da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Tar tak der. Og så er det sånn. Der. Så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde, sa du.
Ok, så den slutter der, og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte programmet, hva gjør jeg da?
Ja, bare slår du sammen permene.
Ja.
På den måten der. Sånn. Da er den lukket her, ligger alt lagret inni der.
Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her.
Nei, alt ligger lagret inni her. Ja. I tilfelle det sitter fyr på LGA, det er kanskje litt sannsynlig. Så.
Ja, ok. Nei, for det er noe med det, ikke sant, når du har holdt på med skriftruller,
ja.
så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja. Ja. Det er greit. Ja, men det er en ting før du går. Du må gå gjennom en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner sånn, og så, hva du kaller det?
Blar.
Jeg blar.
Ja, blar videre.
Blar frem og tilbake. Og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den. Flott. Kjempefint. Ja, men du, vent, ikke sant? Nå er den sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den.
Nei, du har på feil side. Du må åpne fra andre siden.
Så det er ikke likegyldig, det, altså?
Åpne fra den siden her. Sånn. Der. Der nå.
Ja vel.
Har du lest manualen, eller?
Manualen?
Det skal følge med som manualen som brukerveiledning. Den sitter den der. Der, vet du.
Ja, den, ja.
So the book comes with a guide for users, and he's asking, right? So the point is well taken, right? I mean, if you've ever helped somebody who's not good with computers use something, it's amazing the kinds of things that again, that you and I, as really technically sophisticated people, totally take for granted, right? We're like, yeah, whatever. You save your document, and it goes to Dropbox, or it goes here, or it goes up to some cloud. Like, no problem, right? We're comfortable kind of moving in those ways. But if we think about how people who are not comfortable deal with that kind of thing, it's a very different situation. So that comes back to this idea of modeling where things are, right? So that we know that you can drop down what kind of items, right? You could design one of these interfaces yourself. If you go to the File menu, what are you going to find? Okay, new, open, save, right? Confusingly, too, sometimes we'll see save, and then we'll see save ... right? Or, behind that, save a copy, which is redundant, right? I mean, every time you save a file, you're making a copy of it, right? So again, why do these interfaces get built like this? Who builds them? You guys, who really know what you're doing. Right? We're designing things for a world of people who, by and large, do not know what they're doing. If they did, right? Let's assume everybody in the world had a representative, like a comfort with using computers and machines that's on par with you guys. We'd all be out of jobs, right? We could all just have command line interfaces and all the kind of stuff that we like to nerd out and use, right? But we don't. We have a world full of people who don't want to take the time to learn this stuff, who for whatever reason don't think they have to learn this stuff. Of course, then when they have to do something, they call you, right? I mean, who here is the tech support person for your entire extended family? Yeah, that's as many hands as I expected to see, right? What we possess is a very rare kind of knowledge. The problem is that while we can sit there and help somebody, right, like this monk being helped with how to open a book, I mean, what's the joke about that? Why is that funny? What did we have before books? Scrolls, right? One big long sheet of paper that was rolled up. So you can see how this metaphor, changing how we read, right? That's a very different kind of thing. If we have a medieval scroll, which I'm taking the time to draw because this is kind of interesting, right? You just read by pulling on the paper versus a codex, or a book as it's called, right? Where your whole method of reading, right? If we're going Western languages that read left to right, you read down this page, and then you read down this page following. This is a big leap. If all your life, all your literate life, you as a handful of people on the planet who can actually read, at the point that we go from scrolls to books, right? That marks a major change because you're used to reading in one direction. What happens on the web? We literally call it scrolling and scroll bars, right? We're right back to where we started. If we want to take this little jokey thing with the monk, he might actually be more comfortable with a copy of Internet Explorer than with a book, because at least that's what he's used to. One long, continuous screen, right? Which is another interesting point. This particular spatial metaphor, right, where we have things that exist above and below a window, that's pretty second nature. Anybody got toddlers in their family? Aaron, have you ever seen one of them use an iPad or a phone? Is that not the creepiest experience in your life? Why is it creepy?
Because they're like really little, they haven't really learned much yet, but they can navigate it.
Yes, right? It's horrifying. Like versus putting a toddler in front of the 286 computer that I first learned on. Like they'd have the keys pulled off, right? Little kids are destructive, but you put those. And then, Aaron, have you ever seen them then use or try to interact with a print magazine?
And they just like rip it.
Yeah, like the kids start tapping on the pictures, and for them, like a printed magazine is always going to be an iPad that doesn't work, right? It's just broken because you can't swipe on anything and you can't tap on anything. We laugh, but wait, TK, you feel old? Imagine how I feel, right? I still think of a mouse as like a newfangled input device, like, oh, back in my day, right? My original 286Z, well, actually, before that, I had a green screen 8086 that was like the green screen computer that had the monitor and the keyboard in one giant shell, right? That thing couldn't do anything, but because it didn't even really have a respectable operating system. But my first 286 computer, I don't think we had, maybe we had, no, we did not have a mouse originally. And then we got a mouse, and it was a 3-button mouse, which you don't see anymore, right? My family like went down all the wrong track. Like we were a Betamax family. For those of you who know what Betamax is, it was overtaken by VHS tapes. This was back before Netflix and chill. It was rewind the tape and chill, right? Well, you kind of had to because, like, if you didn't rewind it, or if you got the video from the video store and somebody rewind it, like you would have to rewind the video before you could watch it. And sometimes, like if you're getting like a 5-hour movie like Lawrence of Arabia or something like that, it took a while to rewind it, right? That's when we did our chill, during the rewind cycle, okay? Now I've completely lost where I was going with that. Oh, the 3-button mouse. So the first mouse that I got, it had this little reflective grid that you had to use it on. You couldn't just move the mouse anywhere on the table. You had to use this little reflective grid in order for the mouse to work properly, because they hadn't figured out that you could just use whatever surface, right? So you kids, and that's another interesting thing. Mouse pads. Has anybody here ever owned a mouse pad? Probably. Okay, a couple of you? All right, so I don't feel quite as old. Mouse pads used to be like the actual thing for the mouse that we first owned, where it had an actual function. You needed the pad in order to use the mouse, and if you got too far on the pad, you had to pick the mouse up, put it back, right? Which, of course, is the same behavior even if you're using a mouse on a tabletop like that, right? But then people got used to having something to put their mouse on, and then companies are like, hey, we should put our logo on a piece of foam rubber that people can have on their desks, right? And what was that was the other thing that was interesting. My first mouse was an optical mouse. Your first mouse probably was not, which was the other reason for the mouse pad. Yeah, it was a ball. And if the ball got really dirty because you were a total slob in front of the computer and had Dorito dust and spilled soft drinks and stuff like that, the ball would get sticky, and then you had to take the ball out. You actually had to wash it. Are you okay, TK? You can't believe what it was like in the old days, right? I can't tell you how many mice I went through in college because I was a total slob in front of my computer in college and just, right? Okay, mouse pads, scrolling, windows, expertise. Let's take this back to motion, right? So some of these things are very, right? If you watch a toddler use an iPad, there is a certain kind of, like, we are gestural creatures. Before we're verbal, we point at things. Right? As every little kid, you have to teach them not to point. Why do you have to teach kids not to point? Well, okay, it's rude, but why don't kids just know that it's rude? Why is this weird dude, over there, something like that? Like, why do kids not understand that this is rude? Right, yeah. If you've ever been around like a pre-lingual kid, and they want something, this is their communication device, which is the beauty of things like these touch screens. This speaks to a very primitive, low, simian, kind of part of your brain, right? There's no one needs the instruction manual for this, right? Versus our very delicate. I mean, this is insanity. This whole thing. Where does this come from? This whole part up here. Like, where in time would we have to travel to see the first one of those? Like, early in the 19th century, right? This keyboard layout called QWERTY. Why was it why were the keys organized this way? There's all kinds of different theories, right? There's other versions of the keyboard, right? If you go to France, they love the Dvorak key arrangement. But QWERTY went out big time in the United States. Who was the first company to manufacture typewriters? Anybody know this? Remington. Anybody a hunter?
Yeah.
What is that, Remington? What did Remington make before they made typewriters?
Firearm.
Guns! Yeah. So why would Remington, a firearm manufacturer, be really good at making typewriters? What did Remington do? Completely change things like the Civil War.
Triggers.
Well, not triggers. Guns have always had triggers unless you talk about the old Elmer Fudd, big barrel thing, right? What was important about the manufacturing process that Remington and others figured out? Interchangeable parts, right? That was a big demonstration that the Remington factory people would do, that they could assemble a rifle from multiple different generations of parts, right? So they got really good at doing mechanical manufacturing with very high tolerances in terms of how these pieces can be fit together. Anyway, the story is more complicated than that. But this is a 19th century interface, and it hasn't changed all that much, right? Even these characters, like the exclamation mark and the @ sign and the dollar sign, those have lived above those numbers for a very long time. They all come from commerce, right? Which is where keyboards or typewriters were used originally. So it was helpful to have things like your monetary unit or a percentage sign. What's the interesting thing about that? If we look at, I don't know why I'm going to do this with my back to you, but why not? If we look at an 8-bit ASCII table, that one doesn't work at all. Right? Whoop. Did not expect that to be there. Not used to being this side of the desk interacting with the computer. Right? If we look at these characters, right? Here's decimal 33 is our exclamation mark. 34 is a little different because that's got a quote, but here's 35, which is, if we go over, that's right above my 3. The dollar sign is right above my 4. The percentage sign is right above my 5. Ampersand has switched places here, at least on this Mac, right? But if we go down to 9 and 10, there are our parentheses, right? This is really important. Like, why are those things in the position they are in ASCII? What is ASCII again? American Standard Code for Information Interchange, and what more abstractly is ASCII? It's a coded character set. It says we're going to take this set of binary numbers, 0s and 1, and if you string these things together, they mean exclamation mark, or they mean capital R, or they mean lowercase y, right? The order of the characters in ASCII are based on the order of the keys on a keyboard from the 19th century. What else is interesting about that? All of your interesting symbols, right? We couldn't have programming languages if we didn't have the stuff over here in this column. Right? It's 1968 and you're trying to invent a programming language. You use all of these things to interesting effect so that you don't have to write out, here are the arguments being passed to the function. No, you just use your parentheses to set those things up. Okay? But still, the idea that, like, we have this keyboard for interacting, and then we've got now on here we've got a trackpad, but this is still motion at a distance, right? You have to be able to make the mental leap between your finger working on one surface, manipulating something else someplace else, right? Which is always true with mice, which again, when we get to these kind of interfaces, that changes our relationship to things. Okay? Scrolling. I think that's where I was heading. We can review the tape later and figure out where I was heading. Gosh, I haven't talked about any of this stuff. That's okay. We've got another half hour, right? Right? This is expected behavior. Nobody needs to be told that this is how scrolling works, right? Have you ever used a website where scrolling does not work this way? Where you start to scroll down and it starts moving horizontally? The Wired site from the UK used to be like that. I don't think it's like that anymore. It's harder to find examples of sites that still do this because it's such a universally frowned upon practice.
Say in a file browser explorer,
Where you scroll down and it goes across. Yeah. It looks like they fixed this. But there's a particular name for that behavior called scroll jacking. Scroll jacking. It's from hijacking, right? Where you take some expected behavior. Yeah, it's not something dirty. Scroll jacking, where you take some behavior like when I move my pointer down or up, depending on how you've got your thing configured, that I'm going to get motion from that same direction like that. Okay. I feel like I'm losing you guys big time here. That's okay. Wouldn't be the first time that happened either. All right, let's talk about how motion works. All right. Is this motion constant when I flip my screen like that? Or is there acceleration and deceleration? It goes really fast. Yes, no, maybe so. Right? How does motion work in the physical world? Okay, you said accelerate, right? I mean, that's acceleration, right? That marker is moving faster. Obviously, it's a pretty short distance. But we're used to a world where we have acceleration even in our most basic sky to earth motion, right? Most of the motion that you do is not linear, right? What's linear motion? If we want to graph linear motion, what does linear motion look like on a graph? Yeah. We have some distance traveled and some time, right? Linear motion is going to look like that. We rarely see linear motion in nature, right? Because even if we're talking about birds flying or fish swimming, it's usually not a constant motion, right? And if you've ever watched an animal hunt, right? Some Saturday morning when you turn on those nature shows where you get to see one animal eat another animal, right? You watch a lion take down a gazelle or something like that, right? Animals are really good at accelerating. And of course, most of the other kind of motions that we do, if you pull a chair out for somebody, that's never linear motion, right? Most of us have a little courtesy flourish. We pull it out slowly at first, then yank it back a little bit more. And then, of course, the gentle coast underneath somebody's posterior. Okay? So let's look at, I'm just going to skip to this. This is a site, I'll put this up on our course site. Let's get pure linear motion here, as close as linear as we can get. Right? If I want to move this box across the screen in a linear way, that's what linear motion looks like. Does that look natural? How much does that box weigh? Probably not much, right? If you push a box across the floor, again, there's going to be some acceleration to it, and there's probably going to be some deceleration to it. Motion that behaves like this looks very unnatural, right? What video game does this look like? You have to go way back for this. Pong, right? Pong did not have any kind of complex acceleration, right? You had paddles on the other side, and then the ball would just go back and forth, right? That was that. So we look at some of these other motion curves. Like here's a basic easing curve, right? How does that motion look to you? How does that strike you? How much does that box weigh? Does it weigh less or more than it did before? Let's look at another one. Okay, so here's just our standard ease. What if we do ease in? Does the box weigh more or less now? Huh?
More. Seems like it's got a forceful ending.
Right? Yeah, it hits a wall pretty hard, doesn't it? Right? Ease in motion starts natural, right? Kind of ease into something. That's that curve there, right? If we compare it to straight linear motion, right, where we ease in, right, we take a certain amount of time before we really get going, but then, right, that curve continues. If we do something like ease out, Does that look natural? Wait, what? Yeah? Where have you seen this kind of motion? I don't think that looks natural.
It's like the friction at the end of it.
Okay, a little friction at the end. Is it stopping because of it's run out of steam? That's not the word I want. Right? Run out of velocity, or is it hitting something?
It's running out of movements.
Really? To me, it looks like it's hitting something on either side. Then an ease out looks like that we've just hit some kind of limit on this. Let's combine our default ease in and out. How does that look? I mean, most of these do not look like natural movement, at least not over this short span. All right, we can do something different, like see what happens when we expand the width on something. Right? Does that look natural? What do I mean by natural? It's a fair question. Right? I mean, where do we get most of our vocabulary of motion for something like this? I have a very specific answer. It's not interfaces. It's not the real world. It's cartoons. Or did you guys not ever watch cartoons as children? You were too busy studying? Let's slow this way down. Go 1.5 seconds. Jonathan, is that looking any more or less natural now? Easing in. Again, is it stopping because there's no more momentum behind it, or is it stopping because it's hitting something?
That looks like it's hitting something.
Okay, why do we say that this looks like it's hitting something? Yeah, it doesn't ease out, right? That's the way, like if we just push something, right, eventually it stops, right? Of its own accord. But this thing is finally just getting going, and then it hits the wall. So if we go with an ease out, okay, that might be actually slowing down. It starts a little funny. It looks like somebody's giving it a shove, right? Which to my mind makes this makes this box look like it doesn't weigh much, right? It's like pushing a pen across a desk. It doesn't take a lot of force to get this thing going, so it's probably pretty light. All right. Let's look at some of our more interesting ones where we can look at like ease out the sine wave. Is it stopping naturally, or is it stopping because it's hitting something? How about that? Zooming in and out. Is it expanding as big as it can possibly go, or is it expanding to fill a predetermined space? Okay. Right? Versus if we go and look at an ease out sign, right? That doesn't look like it's hitting a wall. It's looking more natural. All these things matter in terms of how you understand the interface that you're working with, how light it is. Has anybody ever had an app from the, like most of them get fixed pretty quickly because people howl about this stuff in the reviews? All right, let's make something ridiculously long here. Do you like that? How heavy is this thing? What's it made out of? What are you made out of? Right? Does watching something like this, and if you are actually the poor person who's tapping something to make it activated, this makes your day feel like it is never going to end. Right?
That's true.
You know, click to see a preview of this image. Okay, let's see a preview of this image. right? Come on! How many seconds? Not 2,500, it feels like it, right? This is in milliseconds, so we're looking at something that's 2.5 seconds. To most people, a second does not feel like a very long time. Or rather, to most people, a second doesn't seem like a long time, right? But if you wait for a second, a whole second, a please kill me now second, for something to open across the width of your iPhone or your Android phone, you'll die, right? Because again, it's one thing to have one action like this that takes that much time. But if this is an app where you're sliding, right? Here, this is Tinder. Swipe left, right? You wouldn't keep using the app because it takes so long for that particular thing, right? This is mournful, like, no way. Or whatever direction is. I've never actually used that. I'm kind of glad I'm old enough to have missed that whole thing, right? Right? Same with our height here. 5. If we do this, let's drop the height again. How about that motion? Does that look natural? Occurring in nature. But do you like it? What does this kind of motion convey? We have really intense, I mean, look at the curve, right? We have really intense acceleration and equally intense deceleration. Right? Are there words that you associate with this?
Zoom.
Zoom. Is this sloppy motion or is this precise? You look like you're guessing. Is it not, from watching this, does that not suggest either sloppiness or precision?
Precision.
Why do you say precision?
It's equal on both, like on both ends, I guess.
It's equal at both ends, but what is the story? I know you guys think I'm insane for talking about this stuff, but this really matters. What is the story that this block tells? Is this a confident block, or is this a nervous, weak, timid block?
Confident.
Why do you say confident? Right? If I move my hand like that, confidence. Right? If I'm like, don't know, right? That's not confident. Right? This is where I'm going. Like, we're using these bits of if you're like, crap, guys, we need to have something fade in or fade out, and we can go through, this is just like the starter menu of possible motion that we can do on something. How do you pick one? It's the same as color. Like, if you just say, well, there's this whole color wheel, there's 16 million colors, I don't know, pick your favorite blue. Right? We want to think about the story that motion is telling here. Because again, we're using motion to build a metaphor and to help people who are not as bright as us when it comes to computers understand what's happening. So for me, the little story that this circular ease out is telling is this is confidence and it's precision. It's confidence because there's no doubt. That thing is on the move. But it's precise because then it's taking its time to kind of very carefully fit into a very particular space. This is very different from the kind of like dumb ape, like slap and hit a wall kind of motion. That does not look precise. That looks like somebody screwed up, right? When we do the regular ease out here, let's do this, right? Doink. That one's not even that bad anymore.
I don't even think someone can slap.
Say it again.
I said I don't think anyone can even slap like that.
Yeah. Here, like our ease in, like that does not look like precision or confidence to me, does it? It's like, oh, I guess this is what we want to do. I guess this, right? You laugh, and hopefully it's because you think that you're making connections and not that I'm just up here making an ass out of myself again today, right? But these things matter in terms of the way that people react to the interfaces that we're building. right? Especially when these are triggered by, let's do something interesting here. Right, we can make our own Bezier curves. You see that? Watch. What's that? What's the story that that's telling? Try to get this. What thing have you seen probably at your grandparents' house that looks like that? Or in a cartoon? What interface? Not blinds, but like old school shades. Has anybody ever seen a shade, right? It's on a wound roll and you have to yank it down for it to go up, right? Okay, that tells a very different kind of story. Does that have more personality or less than that last precise one, right? Where we move into space and then let it gradually. Do you want to see this kind of motion when you're checking your bank account balance? If it's full, sure, right? Well, what makes you say, like, why would you not want to see that if it's not full?
Because it makes me feel kind of happy, like it's like a child, like, oh look, I have stuff.
Exactly, right? This is a playful kind of motion, right? Come on, ITM students, we have a switch or something and we move it from point A to point B. We don't go like that and have it move back into place. This is very, very playful, elastic kind of motion, right? This could be really fun on things like a kid's game or something like that. Okay? And of course, we can make it even more ridiculous and do these kinds of little, right? Does that scream precision? Look how that thing is ending. Like, whoa, too far. All right. I'm done trying to persuade you guys on this point today. General questions about motion as a general principle. What is doing in interfaces? Easing out or easing in? Because the screen ease out or ease in. It's harder to tell, I know, when it goes fast. Sometimes I just like to make the sound that goes with it. Yeah, if the sound is, it's usually easing out, right? It starts really fast, and then again, we've got a little hint of precision here, right? That is ending very specifically. Now, what would it look like if Apple was like, oh, let's make it kind of playful, and it'll go a little bit past the screen you want, and then snap back into place, right? That would be really playful. It'd also probably get really annoying really fast, right? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? We have this kind of thing, right, where it did kind of like the cartoonish, like, I gotta run, right? That's every you should go home, go to YouTube and find like old Tom and Jerry and Roadrunner cartoons, right? What does a cartoon character do when it's going to run really fast? It doesn't start running, right? It does the back up and then, right? Or the back up and then the Fred Flintstone like feet that are moving, but Fred Flintstone's not actually on the go yet, and then like that. Yeah, Roadrunner, right? Although the Roadrunner is usually pretty good. Roadrunner is very precise. It's poor Wile E. Coyote. He's the one that's always getting maimed and decapitated and crushed, right? Because he doesn't have the same kind of graceful, precise motion. All right, that's it. Wednesday, we'll just watch Roadrunner cartoons in here. Talk about, yeah, I figured that would get some screams and excitement in the room. Right, but again, speed matters for these things in terms of how we're interpreting the motion, right? Here's a nice, crisp 600 milliseconds, but if we blow this thing out, that cute little motion, if we blow it out to 3 whole seconds, is that cute? No, it's just sad. It's like whimsical block that's having a bad day, like, oh, I'm just too depressed, right? That's not fun anymore. It doesn't look fun. It just looks like intoxicated or something, like, whoa, where am I supposed to be? It's not confident anymore. It's not playful. Okay. I said I was going to stop, and I think this time I really mean it. Because nobody is on this journey with me anymore. All right, so Monday we're going to look at CSS transitions. We'll look at using some of these Bezier curves, right? Because if you look just below here, one of the things I like about this is this will tell us how to set up our own custom Bezier curves. Akvila's cracking up over there. You're on Reddit? Who wouldn't be? I wish I were too. All right, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.